Welcome back to the channel, everybody. I'm Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon and The Blackest Heart, both books published by Simon & Schuster's Saga Press. Today we're reviewing Suffer the Children by John Saul. Now, I was in the mood for some great 80s horror, and I was thinking, who's one of those old 80s authors that was popular back there besides Stephen King and Dean Koontz and that I have not read yet that I could kind of get into? And I was like, oh, I remember John Saul. His stuff seemed to be everywhere back in the 80s and 90s. I'll go get a nice 80s horror novel, John Saul. So I went to the Barnes & Noble, and they only had a couple John Saul novels there, but they happened to have his first one, which was Suffer the Children. So I got it. Now, this came out in 1977, so it's not quite an 80s horror novel. Actually, we're going to get into that a little bit. Over 1 million in print. When I Wikipedia'd John Saul, I found out that his debut novel, Suffer the Children, had sold over 1 million copies. Now, let's talk about the cover. Because when I had this in line and I was buying it, and the person I was with said, "That's the stupidest, most awful book cover I've ever seen." And I was like, isn't it though? That's part of its charm, actually. I mean, this is the original cover illustration of a baby that's got its limbs all severed. Its head is bashed in and its limbs are severed, and oh my Lord. I don't know who illustrated it, but it's illustrated pretty fucking poorly, and it's just absolutely screams out late 1970s horror novel, and I love it. And I love that my friend said, that's the worst cover I've ever seen. And because it really, really is. But it's beautiful in its awfulness. Absolutely beautiful. Now, okay, I got a few issues with. I got a few things to talk about here. So I thought if I enjoyed this first book, which has sold over 1 million copies, I would then go ahead and collect the rest of the John Saul books, and there's something like maybe 29 or so of them, and I would read them in order of publication, just like I'm rereading the Stephen King books in order of publication. So after reading this, I haven't made up my mind if I'm going to do that or not. So it's set. The prologue is set in 1887. It's not about the 1980s at all. The prologue is set in 1887. It's got a little girl who's chasing a rabbit. There's a dirty old man watching her chase the rabbit. There's a sea, an ocean, there's a cliff, and the dirty old man follows the girl into the woods. It gets creepy from there. The little girl ends up having horrible things happen to her that happen off scene. Thank goodness it's not described in detail, but we know what happened. And then the little girl is stuffed. Her dead body is stuffed behind a rock. And then we jump to 1962, which is where the rest of the story takes place. So I was hoping to get a horror novel set in the 1980s, because that's what I was in the mood for. A little Stranger Things, you know. I got a horror novel written in 1977 that was set in 1962. Anyway, it's all right. So this house, it's called the Conger House. The old man that killed the little girl in the prologue, his house is still there, and it's called the Conger House. It's known as a big, huge house. It's like a rich person. It's like one of those big houses, generational wealth type houses. You know what I'm saying? It's in a place called Portobello. Now, I usually Google things in books where if there's a town or something, I'll usually Google whether that's a real place or not. I just assumed Portobello was made up. If there's a Portobello out there in the universe, people, let me know. I did not Google that. Anyway, it starts out with Ray, who's a cop, and little girls are starting to go missing again. You know, and then it's tied into the missing girl in 1887. They're starting to go missing again in 1962. Now, Sarah and Jack Conger are living in the Conger House now, and they've got some daughters, and so creepy things. This book is a slow burn, seductive journey through creepy attics, skeleton-filled caves, tea parties with corpses, sad cats that are forced to wear cosplay outfits. In fact, I've never read a book that has more cat abuse in it than this book. So if you're triggered by that, don't read this at all. Oh Lord, the poor cat. The poor little cat. Even when the cat is dead, the torture doesn't stop. I won't even okay. The dead cat is like, the cat is not forced to wear cosplay while he's alive, because clearly cats ain't gonna put up with that. They ain't gonna put up with that shit. But once it's dead, it is dolled up in all sorts of stuff. Anyway, we'll just leave it at that. So this didn't actually, speaking of which, this book didn't really grab me until about halfway through, when one of the little girls goes off the rails, and now I'm wondering, with the dead cat, the desecration of the cat corpse. And now, about halfway through the book, I'm wondering, is this book actually about are we watching the makings of a little girl serial killer? Like a little toddler girl serial, is that what we're reading? And I'm not going to tell you whether that is what you're reading or not. But it is just a, anyway, I don't know why I'm laughing now. There's a character named Josie Wales in the book. Not the Josie Wales from the Clint Eastwood outlaw gunslinger movie, but there's a character named Josie Wales. I was like, wait, how did that, and it's a female, and I'm like, well, which came first? Now I'm like, which came first? Suffer the Children Josie Wales, or the Clint Eastwood Josie Wales? I don't know. That is a mystery. In fact, the whole thing is a mystery. It's actually not even really a horror novel. Well, if you're a cat, you would be horrified. It's not really a horror novel. It's more of a quaint, slightly R-rated thriller, Dean Koontz-esque thriller novel, I guess is what I would call it. So I was, like I said, I was kind of ho-humming my way through the first half of this book until the weird cat shit showed up, and then I was like, whoa, what the fuck? And then I was into it. I don't know why that drew me in. I was like, I gotta figure out what's up with the cat shit. Anyway, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to think about this. Do I want to now purchase and read, and review for my channel the rest of the John Saul collection in order of publication? The jury is still out, because I enjoyed this. I'd say it at about a 6.5 out of 10 level. It could have been more gruesome. And maybe I'm just used to reading Jack Ketchum and Brian Keene, where everything is just disgusting. This wasn't gruesome more than it was just twisted and weird. But anyway, that's my review of Suffer the Children by John Saul, with the single worst cover illustration ever